The stars above were endless, vast, and cold, yet humanity had not just looked upon them, they had ventured into them, defying the odds, breaking barriers that would have crushed lesser species. Earth, their cradle, had long since been reduced to ashes, a footnote in the history of the galaxy. The cataclysm that had ended their homeworld was a tragedy, yes, but it was also the seed from which humanity had grown into something far more terrifying to the galaxy's powers than they could have ever imagined. The Earth had burned in the flames of war. The kind of war no one had expected, an external conflict, one so far-reaching and devastating that humanity's very existence was obliterated from their home. It was an event so catastrophic, it erased the very idea of humanity from the minds of the galactic powers who had watched from afar, oblivious to the threat. Earth's destruction was not simply a physical tragedy, it was an ideological one. The day the last of humanity's monuments crumbled, the day the last cities fell, the galaxy believed they had seen the end of them. But the humans had never been mere survivors. The loss of their home did not mean the end of their race, nor the end of their struggle. No, the destruction of Earth had only ignited the fire that burned within their souls. From the ashes of their once great civilization, humanity had risen, not just to survive, but to redefine what it meant to be human. 40,000 years passed. The galaxy had moved on, as it always did. Civilizations rose and fell, empires crumbled, and species forgot the stories of their distant ancestors. The humans had been relegated to myth, their names spoken only in hushed tones, a warning whispered among the stars. The legends of the lost Earth were nothing but tales, vague memories of a world lost long ago, long forgotten by those who never experienced it. No one remembered the humans in the same way they remembered the great empires of the past. And yet, they were not truly forgotten. Because humanity had never stopped. After the fall of Earth, humanity scattered, their remnants spread across the stars in search of survival. For 40,000 years, they fought to rebuild. They had no home, no central government, no unifying cause. What they did have was ingenuity. Their greatest gift was not their technology, it was their refusal to accept the impossible. And so, they built. From humble beginnings, they spread across the galaxy, settling on new planets, colonizing the farthest reaches of space. They adapted to every environment, survived every disaster, and overcame every challenge. In time, they developed technologies far beyond the understanding of the galaxy's established powers, ancient machines capable of manipulating time, warships capable of moving through space faster than thought itself, and weapons that could obliterate entire fleets with a single thought. But for all their advancements, for all their strength, humanity never forgot. They never stopped remembering the one thing they had lost, their home. Earth. And then, one day, after 40,000 years of silence, humanity sent a message. It wasn't a fleet that arrived first, nor an army or warship. No, it was something much more terrifying. It was a signal, a single message, transmitted across the galaxy. A message that would forever change the course of history. The message itself was simple. We are coming. At first, the galaxy's powers thought it was a joke, a hoax from some fringe group or rebellious faction. The humans had been forgotten, and no one believed that they still existed, let alone posed a threat. The Zorgoth, the Veldari, the Elkari, the galaxy's ruling empires dismissed the message as an absurdity. The idea that a race which had been wiped out millennia ago could return to challenge their dominance was laughable. But then, one by one, human ships began to appear in the outermost sectors of the galaxy. And they came, not in small numbers, but in waves. Tens of thousands of ships faster than any race had ever seen, equipped with technologies that defied all logic. Ships that could slip between dimensions, that could appear out of nowhere and disappear before a counterattack could be made. These were not the remnants of a lost species. These were the progeny of a species that had spent millennia preparing, waiting, and planning. The humans were no longer simply a scattered remnant. They had returned, not just to survive, but to reclaim what was theirs. And they were angry. The return. It began in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where few had dared to venture. Human fleets, so advanced that their designs seemed to warp the very fabric of reality, entered the star systems of those who had long forgotten their name. The first to feel their presence were the Elkari, a race of conquerors, once the pride of their empire. When the humans arrived, they arrived with vengeance, and they left nothing but destruction in their wake. Entire fleets of Elkari ships, advanced and vast as they were decimated in the blink of an eye. The humans didn't just engage them in battle, they hunted them, tracking them across star systems like predators on the hunt. The Elkari were not the only ones to feel the wrath of the humans. The Zorgoth, the mightiest empire in the galaxy at the time, had already suffered under the shock of humanity's return. Their empire had fallen apart within weeks, their once proud fleets turned to dust before the human onslaught. The Zorgoth had long since thought themselves untouchable, their war machines superior to anything in existence. They were wrong. With each new battle, humanity's presence spread like wildfire. Entire sectors fell under their influence, their ships appearing at the edge of systems, striking with deadly precision, and then disappearing again before anyone could react. Entire civilizations who had long lived in the shadow of their former empires now faced a new threat, one far more terrifying, a threat that was not a single species, but a relentless, unstoppable wave of humanity's vengeance. For the first time in 40,000 years, the galaxy felt fear. The message humanity sent wasn't just one of war. It wasn't a demand for resources or a plea for peace. It was a statement of intent, a declaration of purpose. The humans had returned, and they were here to change everything. Earth had been destroyed, yes, but in the destruction of Earth, something had been forged. Something stronger than any empire, more enduring than any military, more resilient than any race. The humans had endured. They had survived. And now, they were here not to reclaim what had been lost, but to ensure that such a loss would never happen again. The message they sent was clear. We will not let the galaxy forget. We will not let the weak and the powerless suffer at the hands of the strong. You will remember Earth, and you will remember the humans. You will remember that we are coming, and we will never stop until we've made this galaxy our own. The galaxy's powers scrambled in response. The ruling factions convened in an emergency summit, and for the first time in millennia, the true rulers of the galaxy feared that their reign was over. They had dismissed humanity as a myth, as a relic of the past. But now, they realized that the humans were no myth. They were here, and they were stronger than they had ever been. For the humans had learned one thing over their 40,000 years of exile: when you have nothing to lose, you fear nothing. The galaxy's great empires, once invincible, now found themselves caught in a war unlike anything they had ever fought. The humans didn't fight by the rules. They didn't care for diplomacy, alliances, or the endless games of power that had ruled the galaxy for eons. They fought to survive, to make the galaxy a place where the weak no longer had to fear the strong. They fought with the same relentless spirit that had allowed them to endure when all seemed lost. And they had one thing the galaxy's powers did not: the unbreakable will to never stop. The galaxy at war. Humanity's fleets continued their advance, their ships appearing at the edge of every major system, in every key sector. They were not the invaders of old. They didn't need to conquer every world. They didn't need to destroy every empire. They simply needed to send a message that echoed across every star. We are coming. And we will never stop. The galaxy's empires could not ignore the humans forever. Slowly, the alliances began to fracture. Factions that had long fought for dominance were now forced to confront a new reality: humanity was not just another race among many. They were the future. And as the galaxy's great powers crumbled, humanity stood tall, ready to write their new chapter in the stars. The war had begun in earnest, but it wasn't like any war the galaxy had ever known. There was no grand strategy, no formal lines of battle. It was a relentless storm of guerrilla strikes, sudden raids, and swift disappearances. Humanity didn't march into star systems and conquer them in the traditional sense. They didn't need to. Their strength lay in their unpredictability and adaptability. They appeared when least expected, hit hard, and vanished before their enemies could retaliate. Humanity's tactics were designed not to crush empires in open battle, but to cripple them in ways that made their entire way of life untenable. They targeted key infrastructure, attacked strategic resources, and sabotaged supply chains. They learned their enemies' patterns, and then they broke them. It wasn't just a war of destruction, it was a war of disruption. The galaxy's great powers were disoriented. One by one, they started to see their fleets decimated, their supply routes severed, their economies thrown into chaos. At first, they thought it was an isolated incident, a few ships here and there that couldn't possibly threaten the might of their empires. But as the attacks grew more frequent and more powerful, they realized the terrifying truth: humanity was everywhere. And they were far more organized and capable than any of the galaxy's established powers had ever imagined. The first real taste of humanity's fury came when the Zorgoth, the most advanced and militaristic race in the galaxy, attempted to retaliate. They had thought themselves safe, their fleets fortified and their war machines unmatched. But the humans had been watching, studying, waiting for this moment. The Zorgoth's greatest fleet was sent into a system on the fringes of their territory, with the expectation that they would crush any human presence there. What they didn't know was that humanity had already infiltrated their ranks. In a move that sent shockwaves through the galaxy, a small human fleet slipped into Zorgoth space and took control of their most powerful warship, the Zortak, a dreadnought that was said to be invulnerable. In one swift stroke, the humans took over the flagship, turning its formidable weapons against its own fleet. The Zorgoth didn't even have time to react before they found their own warships turned to ash in a flurry of unexpected attacks. It wasn't just the destruction of the fleet that sent fear through the galaxy. It was the message that accompanied it. A signal broadcasted from the Zortak itself. "We are not the lost children of Earth. We are the hammer. And you will be the anvil." The Zorgoth were stunned. Their most powerful ships were gone, their reputation shattered. The galaxy's mightiest empire had been brought to its knees by a force they had dismissed for millennia. But that was just the beginning. Humanity's actions reverberated throughout the galaxy. As news of the attack spread, it was clear to the other powers that they were no longer facing an isolated threat, they were facing an entire species that was capable of bending entire star systems to its will. The alliances formed. The galaxy's old powers quickly realized that humanity was not a singular threat, it was a revolution in the making. The Zorgoth, the Elkari, the Veldari, all the great empires and military forces that had long ruled the stars suddenly found themselves forced into a coalition of their own, not out of desire, but out of sheer necessity. Their once dominant positions were eroding rapidly under the relentless pressure of human aggression. For the first time in 40,000 years, the galaxy's great powers came together in unity, not to expand their rule, but to save it. But the formation of the coalition was not an easy one. The factions that had long waged their own wars, each vying for dominance, found it difficult to work together. Trust between them was fragile, and each was more concerned with securing their own power than fighting the humans. In the shadows of this uneasy alliance, espionage and subterfuge ran rampant. Some factions secretly attempted to make deals with the humans, hoping to gain favor in the coming order, while others began to harbor dark thoughts of betrayal. The humans, however, were watching and listening, every move, every shift in the power balance. For humanity, the war was never about simple conquest. It was about something far more profound, the rebirth of a galactic order where the people, not the empires, held the power. Every battle, every strike, was part of a larger vision. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for justice, for an end to the oppression that had defined the galaxy's ruling empires for millennia. They weren't just fighting to destroy the old order, they were fighting to build something new. Something that had been born from the ashes of Earth. Humanity had not forgotten its homeworld, and it would never stop until every corner of the galaxy knew the price of ignoring them. The counterattack. As the galaxy's powers slowly united in a desperate bid to stop the human tide, they were blindsided by the next wave of humanity's might, a counteroffensive that came from all directions. hitting the galaxy's strongest powers in their most vulnerable spots. Humanity didn't just fight in the traditional sense, they launched targeted, surgical strikes across the galaxy's key systems where the Empire's leaders and military leaders resided. They didn't need to destroy entire fleets, they just needed to unseat the rulers. And so, one by one, humanity began to eliminate the leaders of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful empires. Their military strategies were devastatingly effective, using covert operations, surprise attacks, and calculated sabotage. The fall of each major empire capital sent shockwaves across the galaxy, and the ruling elites found themselves running for their lives, unsure of who could be trusted, unsure of whether they would be the next target. The galaxy had long been ruled by the few, the elites who held all the power, who made decisions from their ivory towers, never considering the lives of the countless species they oppressed. But humanity had never been content with the status quo. They had watched their homeworld burn because of the unchecked power of the few, and they would not allow it to happen again. As the galaxy's ruling powers fell apart, the people of countless star systems that had long been subjugated began to rise up. Humanity's message wasn't just one of military might. It was a message of hope. It was a call to the oppressed, to the powerless, to those who had been ignored for centuries. The galaxy began to see a new era of rebellion, of unity against the old, broken systems of power. Humanity's return was not just the return of a species, but the birth of a new way. The rise of the new order. Humanity had long been underestimated, written off as a lost cause, a race that had no future after the destruction of their homeworld. But in the 40,000 years since that day, they had rebuilt, not just their technology, but their spirit. They had turned the tragedy of Earth's destruction into a rallying cry for the future, a future where the power of the few no longer dictated the fate of the many. As the war raged on, it became clear to all the galaxy's inhabitants, humanity was not interested in domination for the sake of power. They weren't like the Zorgoth or the Elkari, who fought to expand their empires. They fought for something far more powerful, the belief that every species, every sentient being, deserved a voice. Humanity had built their own empire, yes. But it was not an empire of subjugation. It was an empire of freedom, one that would, in time, offer protection to the galaxy's most vulnerable. And it was an empire born from the belief that no matter how long it took, no matter how many years passed, the humans would never stop fighting to create a galaxy where the weak were no longer prey to the powerful. The message had been sent, and the galaxy was about to learn that the humans would not be forgotten. Their story had only just begun. The galaxy, once divided between countless empires and factions, was now embroiled in a conflict that threatened to reshape everything. Humanity's emergence from the shadows was more than a return, it was the spark that ignited a revolution. The older powers, their arrogance long unquestioned, were now forced to confront the true nature of the humans who had been scattered across the stars for 40,000 years. The empire builders, the ancient warlords, and the long-established powers of the galaxy had underestimated humanity. And now, they were beginning to see the price of that mistake. As humanity's presence spread, the ruling empires were no longer safe. It was not just military might that the humans wielded, but the sheer power of their belief, a belief that the old way of doing things was over. The galaxy could no longer be governed by the elite few, the powerful empires that had crushed the lives of countless innocent species. Humanity's message was clear, and it resonated with every corner of the galaxy: no more. The power of humanity's unyielding desire for freedom began to shift the tides of war. Their message, transmitted across countless light years, reached not just the powerful empires they fought against, but also the marginalized species that had long been oppressed. No longer did the galaxy's most vulnerable wait in the shadows. The oppressed, the forgotten, the silenced voices found courage, rallying to humanity's cause. The galaxies unite. Humanity was no longer alone in their war against the galaxy's old powers. They had sparked a fire in the hearts of those who had lived for millennia under the boot of the Zorgoth, the Elkari, and other oppressive empires. Resistance movements, small and fragmented at first, began to form in every system. From the barren worlds of the frontier to the sprawling megacities of the heart of galactic empires, every corner of the galaxy now whispered the same word: humanity. Humanity was no longer just a force of nature, it was a symbol. A symbol of rebellion, of freedom, of the unyielding strength of those who would fight for what was right, no matter the cost. And so, the galaxy began to change. The Zorgoth, who had once thought themselves invincible, found their fleets decimated not just by humanity's relentless strikes, but by the rising tide of rebellion in their own territories. It wasn't just humanity's military power that was undermining them, it was the human spirit of unity and resistance. The Zorgoth could no longer hold their systems together when their own people began to rebel against them, inspired by the humans who had turned the tide of war. The Elkari, too, found themselves fighting on multiple fronts. The old alliances they had relied upon began to fracture as smaller factions within their empire broke away, forming their own coalitions with the humans. Once proud fleets that had dominated the galaxy were now scattered and in disarray, picked apart by human strategy and the growing resistance forces. What had once been a formidable empire was crumbling under the weight of rebellion and the unstoppable force of human ingenuity. Even the once powerful Veldari, masters of diplomacy and control, were not immune. As human forces swept through their borders, alliances were formed and broken in rapid succession. The Veldari had always thought their skill and manipulation would keep them in control, but the humans, with their direct and transparent methods, shattered their delicate web of power. The Veldari found themselves facing not only military defeats but diplomatic isolation as their allies turned their backs on them in favor of the humans. But the true turning point came when the humans launched their greatest offensive yet, a campaign aimed at the heart of the galaxy. The headquarters of the Zorgoth, the Elkari, and the Veldari were located in the same sector, an area considered impenetrable by any known force. It was a choke point where all the major empires' power converged. If humanity could strike there, they could break the stranglehold the empires had over the galaxy. The humans, with their unmatched fleet of advanced warships and stealth technology, took the sector by storm. It wasn't just a battle, it was an overwhelming statement of intent. Entire fleets were torn apart, warships left floating lifeless in the dark void of space. Commanding generals who had once been considered invincible were captured or killed, their reputations obliterated. The shockwaves of the offensive rattled the foundations of the galaxy's ruling powers. The final blow came when the humans, having taken control of the central systems, issued a final ultimatum to the galaxy: the old order is over. The time of the empires has passed. No longer will the strong crush the weak. No longer will you dictate the lives of those beneath you. The galaxy belongs to all who live in it. And those who would resist this truth will be destroyed. The galaxy, stunned by the sudden and overwhelming might of humanity's final assault, had no choice but to concede. The empires, broken and fractured, were left to beg for mercy from the humans who had shattered their dominance. But humanity had no mercy to give. They had seen the cost of oppression, the destruction of their homeworld, and the lives lost in the centuries-long struggle to survive. They would not return to the old ways. The new order of the stars. In the aftermath of humanity's victory, the galaxy began to reorganize itself into a new system, one where power was no longer concentrated in the hands of a few empires, but shared by the people. The first step was the establishment of the Galactic Concord, a council made up of representatives from every species, planet, and system. The goal was simple: to prevent any single power from dominating again. Humanity, now the galaxy's most powerful force, took its place at the head of the Concord, not as rulers, but as leaders. Their role was not to dominate the galaxy, but to ensure that the mistakes of the past of the empires and their endless wars were never repeated. The humans, though weary from their long struggle, knew the cost of power all too well. They had seen what the galaxy could become when power was unchecked, and they were determined to ensure it would never fall into the wrong hands again. At the heart of the Galactic Concord's new mandate was the notion of equality. No species, no empire, no individual would ever be allowed to hold dominion over another. The Concord was founded not on the ideals of conquest, but on unity between species, between cultures, between worlds. And with humanity's guidance, the galaxy slowly began to yield. It wasn't a perfect solution, and there were those who resisted the new order. The old powers, the remnants of the Zorgoth, Elkari, and Veldari empires, still chafed under the new system. But humanity's message, once thought to be nothing more than a warning, had now become a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. The humans had not come to conquer. They had come to free the galaxy from the chains of its past. And in doing so, they had proven that no matter how long it took, no matter how much time passed, humanity would never stop fighting for what was right. The stars, once the domain of the powerful, now belonged to everyone. And it was humanity that had led the way. The foundation of the Galactic Concord was a monumental achievement, but it was only the beginning. The galaxy, though freed from the oppressive grip of the old empires, was a vast and diverse place, and not all were content with the changes humanity had ushered in. The old ways of power and dominance, so ingrained in the fabric of galactic life, could not be wiped away in a single stroke. The galaxy had long been a place of constant war, of hierarchies built on conquest, and some species, some factions, found it difficult to imagine a galaxy without their long-standing position of supremacy. Though humanity had brought down the old empires and established the Galactic Concord to promote equality and peace, the seeds of discontent began to sprout in the shadows. There were those who resented the idea of having to share power, to relinquish the privileges they had enjoyed for centuries. And while the Concord was meant to ensure that no single species would dominate the galaxy again, the power structure that had replaced the old empires was still fragile. The rise of the Old Guard. The first signs of resistance began when several former military leaders of the Zorgoth and Elkari empires, who had managed to survive the collapse of their governments, began forming secret alliances. They called themselves the Old Guard, a faction of warlords, generals, and aristocrats who were determined to restore the glory of their fallen empires. To them, the Galactic Concord was an insult, a weak and fractured system that had no place in a galaxy built on strength and power. Led by the charismatic Zorgoth General Threxel, a battle-hardened veteran of the Zorgoth Wars, and Lorelith, a cunning Elkari diplomat who had played both sides of galactic politics for centuries, the Old Guard began to assemble a powerful covert network. They amassed resources, trained secret militias, and forged alliances with disaffected factions within the Concord, seeking to destabilize the fledgling government. Their ultimate goal was clear: to bring back the age of empires, to restore the dominance of the few over the many. Humanity had expected challenges, but they were unprepared for the scale of the Old Guard's resurgence. The galaxy, still scarred from the recent wars, found itself at a tipping point. On the surface, the Galactic Concord seemed to be working peace-reigned, and for the first time in eons, the galaxy was united under a banner of cooperation. But under the surface, tension festered. Old grudges simmered. And the Old Guard, ever patient, saw their opportunity. The shattering of unity. It started with Whisper's small acts of sabotage and rebellion. A Veldari governor assassinated. A Zorgoth fleet mysteriously destroyed in a quiet corner of space. An Elkari outpost burned to the ground. At first, the Concord leadership dismissed these as isolated incidents. But as the attacks grew more coordinated, it became clear that there was something larger at play. The Old Guard was no longer hiding in the shadows, they were striking with purpose. Humanity's leadership, despite their strength, found themselves spread thin. The forces that had so decisively brought down the old empires were now tasked with defending a fragile peace. While humanity's fleets were still some of the most advanced in the galaxy, the Old Guard had learned from their previous defeats. They had rebuilt, and they had adapted. They had learned to exploit the one weakness humanity had, their deep-seated belief in unity and cooperation. The attacks from the Old Guard escalated. Small factions within the Concord, dissatisfied with their new place in the galaxy, began to turn their backs on the ideals humanity had fought for. They're aligned with the warlords, the generals, the oligarchs of the old regimes. The galactic unity humanity had worked so hard to build began to fracture. Systems that had once pledged allegiance to the Concord now whispered of rebellion. Humanity, never once to back down from a challenge, found themselves at a crossroads. The old guard was using every tool at their disposal, from economic sabotage to psychological warfare, to turn the galaxy's systems against them. For the first time since their return, humanity's resolve was tested to the limit. The rebirth of Earth's legacy. But humanity, as always, would not be broken. The humans who had built the galactic Concord, who had brought down the old empires, were not the same as the empires they had destroyed. They were not conquerors by nature, they were builders. And in the face of the rising darkness, they returned to the core of their identity. They didn't need to impose their will on the galaxy. Instead, they would show the galaxy what it could become when the light of hope burned brightest. The humans began a new campaign, one not of war, but of inspiration. They began to speak to the people of the galaxy directly, not through politicians or generals, but through every means at their disposal, broadcasts, speeches, and the ancient power of human storytelling. They reminded the galaxy of Earth, of their homeworld destroyed, yes, but a symbol of resilience and hope for all. They reminded the galaxy that their strength was not in their military, but in their ability to overcome the impossible, to rise from the ashes. They sent a message to every corner of the galaxy: we are not the conquerors of the stars. We are the survivors, and we are the hope for the future. Join us, or fall with the old powers. The choice is yours. The message was not just a call for unity, it was a call to arms, but not with weapons. It was a call to arms with ideas, with the power of change, of rebuilding. Humanity knew they could not destroy the old guard by force alone. To defeat them, they had to dismantle the ideas that supported them. And it worked. Slowly, systems that had once been at the heart of the old guard's strength began to reconsider. Those who had aligned with the warlords saw the true nature of their leaders: power-hungry, self-serving, and ultimately doomed to fail. And they saw in humanity's message the hope of a future built on cooperation and mutual respect. Rebellions broke out within the ranks of the old guard, and entire factions splintered off to join the Concord, disillusioned with the false promises of the past. The turning point came when the largest faction of the old guard, led by Trexel himself, attempted to seize control of the Concord's capital. They had amassed a fleet larger than any the galaxy had seen in centuries, hoping to strike a decisive blow that would tear humanity's fragile peace apart. But when they arrived, they found that the Concord was ready. Humanity had not just fought with weapons, but with their minds. They had infiltrated the old guard's ranks, turning their own forces against them. Threxel's forces, once loyal and battle-hardened, found themselves torn between their old loyalties and the new hope humanity had inspired. When the battle began, it wasn't just between ships, it was between ideologies. It was the last stand of the old, broken empires against the promise of something new. Victory through unity. The battle raged for days, but humanity's strength in numbers and unity began to overwhelm the old guard. Threxel, once the feared general, found himself captured, his dreams of galactic conquest shattered. The remnants of the old guard, realizing that their cause was lost, began to surrender. The final blow came when humanity's leaders, not in triumph, but in humility, offered them a chance at redemption. They would not destroy the old guard, they would offer them a place in the new order. Not all would accept. Some would continue to resist, hidden in the fringes of the galaxy, but their time was running out. The idea of the galactic concord of equality, of peace, of a shared future had taken root. It could not be undone by the last few remnants of the old powers. Humanity had not just defeated the empires, it had won the galaxy's heart. The galaxy now stood on the brink of a new era, one where all species, all sentience, could coexist in a way that had never before been imagined. And the humans, those who had given everything to bring the galaxy to this point, stood ready to lead, not as conquerors, but as guardians of that future. The galaxy, after millennia of conflict and oppression, had been reshaped by humanity's return. What began as a series of guerrilla strikes against the old empires, the Zorgoth, Elkari, and Veldari, soon turned into a full-scale revolution. Humanity, once thought lost, emerged from the ashes of Earth's destruction, bringing with them a message of hope and equality. They didn't seek to rule the galaxy, but to dismantle the oppressive powers that had kept the stars in chaos for eons. With unmatched strategy and the spirit of rebellion, humanity crippled the empires, showing the galaxy that strength was not just about military might, but about unity and justice. The Galactic Concord was born an alliance of systems, species, and individuals united under the ideals of equality and cooperation. But the galaxy was not without resistance. The remnants of the old powers, a faction known as the Old Guard, rose up against the New Order, hoping to restore their dominion. Yet, humanity's message resonated across the galaxy, one of hope, of rebuilding, and of freedom. Slowly, the Old Guard's influence began to erode as more systems saw the promise of a peaceful future. In a final battle for control, humanity's forces defeated the Old Guard, not through sheer might, but through the strength of their ideals. The once great empires fell, and their leaders, realizing their cause was lost, were offered a chance for redemption in the new Galactic Concord. The galaxy was forever changed. The age of empires was over. Humanity had led the way, not as conquerors, but as the guardians of a new era, a future where all species could coexist in peace and equality. The stars, once the domain of the powerful, now belonged to everyone. And humanity, having once faced the destruction of their world, proved that no matter how much time passed, they would never stop fighting for a brighter future.